I didn't answer the first call. Seeing her name flash on my phone after all these years made my stomach twist. 10 years apart, a lifetime of silence, and now, 50 years old, gray streaks in our hair, the house half empty without her. She was calling me. I sat on the edge of my recliner, the late afternoon sun slicing through the blinds, and stared at the screen like it was some kind of trick. Finally, I picked up. "Mike," she said. Her voice had that familiar warmth, the one that used to make everything feel safe, even when life was falling apart around us. I need help." I didn't know whether to ask what, or to hang up, or to jump in my car and be there instantly. My mind was spinning, memories crashing over me. Our fights, our laughter, the slow drift apart, and then the abrupt silence that had defined the last decade. "Where are you?" I finally asked. "Home. I mean, my place. Can you come?" There was a tremor in her voice I hadn't heard since the day we left each other. Fear, maybe. Vulnerability. Something that made my chest tighten and my hands itch to just get there. I didn't know what kind of trouble she was in. I didn't know if this was a trap or a real emergency. All I knew was that I was going. I grabbed my keys, threw on a jacket, and as I drove through the streets of our old neighborhood, memories pressed against every corner. The park where we first kissed, the diner where we'd fight over pancakes, the bookstore where she insisted I read poetry with her. All of it felt like it had been paused, waiting for this moment. When I pulled up to her house, the door was slightly ajar. My heart thumped in my chest. I pushed it open, calling her name softly. "Mike?" she said from the kitchen. She was standing there, a little frail looking, but still carrying that quiet strength that had always drawn me to her. She had her hands full of boxes, some knocked over, papers scattered. I can't do this alone," she admitted. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, it was just us. 10 years melted away, and I realized how much I'd missed her. I stepped inside, and everything changed. The air smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, like home should. And in that moment, I knew, whatever had come between us, whatever pride or hurt, I wasn't walking away this time. Not when she needed me. Not when I had needed her all these years too. The living room looked like a storm had hit it. Books, boxes, and half-packed shelves scattered across the floor. She was trying to manage it all on her own, and I could see the exhaustion in the slump of her shoulders. "Sit," I said, pointing to the couch. "You don't have to do everything alone." She hesitated, then sank down beside me, brushing a strand of silver-streaked hair from her face. I noticed the faint lines around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on her knees. Life had been hard on her, harder than I'd realized from afar. "I've been trying to sort out the house, and her voice caught. "I can't," I nodded. "I got you. Whatever you need." We moved through the rooms together, stacking, organizing, carrying. I didn't mind the work. Every time our hands brushed, a small spark shot through me, a reminder of who we were, who we still might be. We laughed quietly at old habits, how she always alphabetized books, how I insisted on dusting corners she'd ignore. But beneath the humor was a shared rhythm, one we hadn't felt in years. After a few hours, we paused, leaning against the kitchen counter, breathing hard. "I forgot how much I missed this," she said softly, almost like a confession. I looked at her and felt my throat tighten. "Me too," I admitted. "I thought I was done missing you." She gave a small, almost shy smile, the one I remembered from the very beginning. It tugged at something deep inside me. 10 years of separation, all the mistakes, the anger, the silence, none of it mattered now. What mattered was this. We were here, together, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe we could be okay. Then she hesitated, glancing at me. I didn't just call because of the house." I frowned. "What is it?" She looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin nervously. "It's personal. I didn't know who else to call. I need you, Mike." I swallowed hard. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. The life we'd lost, the years of distance, the walls we'd built, they all seemed to crumble in that moment. "Then I'm here," I said firmly. "No matter what it is." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in a decade, I felt it. The old trust, the old love, fragile, but still alive. She led me to the bedroom, moving slowly, like every step reminded her of a weight she'd carried alone for too long. The room smelled faintly of vanilla and old linen, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor. I can't explain it all," she said, voice trembling. "It's complicated." I nodded, letting her take her time. "Just tell me what you need me to do." "Hey." She took a deep breath and finally looked me in the eye. "I'm sick, Mike. I didn't want to tell anyone. I didn't want to bother you. But I don't know what else to do." For a second, the world stopped. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would break my ribs. Why didn't you call me sooner?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She shook her head. "I thought I could handle it. I wanted to be strong. But I can't do this alone. And I needed you." The sight of her vulnerability, the quiet courage in her confession, hit me harder than any fight, any betrayal we'd ever endured. I reached out and took her hand. It was warm, trembling slightly, and I held it like I would never let go. "You're not alone," I said firmly. "Not anymore. I'm here. I always should have been." She exhaled shakily, a mixture of relief and fear, and I felt a flood of protective instinct surge through me. I realized then that all the distance, all the years of bitterness, had only made this moment more urgent, more real. We spent the rest of the evening quietly together, just sitting, holding hands, the silence between us filled with unspoken apologies and lingering love. The house was still a mess, the work unfinished, but none of that mattered. She was here, I was here, and finally, it felt like we were beginning again. When she rested her head on my shoulder, I felt a shift deep inside me. It wasn't just about helping her anymore, it was about reclaiming what we had lost, about facing the future together, and for the first time in 10 years, I allowed myself to hope. The next morning, I woke to the quiet hum of her apartment, sunlight spilling across the floor. She was already up, moving slowly in the kitchen, making coffee like it was a ritual, like she had been doing it for decades. I watched her, the way her hair caught the light, the subtle grace in her movements, and a wave of longing hit me. 10 years of absence felt heavier than ever. "I made extra," she said softly when she noticed me watching, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Figured we could eat together." We sat across from each other, 2 mugs of steaming coffee between us, and the silence wasn't awkward. It was charged, full of words neither of us knew how to speak aloud yet. Finally, she broke it. "Mike, I don't know how long I have," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I've been putting off tests, hoping it would go away. But it's not. And now, I can't pretend anymore." I reached across the table and took her hand, my fingers entwining with hers, the warmth spreading through me like fire. "We'll face it together," I said. "Whatever it is, we're not doing it alone." Her eyes glistened, and for the first time in years, I saw that fierce, resilient woman I had fallen in love with, even through all the fights and misunderstandings. But now there was fear, a quiet desperation, and I hated that she had to face it without me by her side for so long. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Doctor's appointments, tests, and consultations filled our schedules. I stayed with her every step, driving to appointments, holding her hand through procedures, keeping her laughing when the weight of reality pressed too hard. At night, when we were alone, she would curl against me, exhausted but grateful, and I felt the depth of what we'd missed. Every argument, every silent year, every moment that should have been ours together. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hospital, we sat on her couch in silence. I handed her a glass of water, and she took it, her hand lingering in mine. "You've changed," she said softly. "You're not just the man I married. You're stronger, calmer, but you still see me." "I never stopped seeing you," I replied. "I just didn't realize how much I needed to be here, with you, for real this time." She laughed quietly, a shaky, beautiful sound. "Funny how it takes life threatening you to make you show up," she teased, though her eyes were serious. "I guess I needed you too, Mike." That night, as I held her in the quiet of her apartment, I realized something crucial. The house, the illness, the chaos. It didn't matter as much as this moment. the way our hearts were reconnecting. She wasn't just a person I was helping. She was my partner, my anchor, my reason. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the future, because we were facing it together. And in the back of my mind, I knew this was the turning point. Whatever came next, treatment, setbacks, uncertainty, it wouldn't break us, because we had found each other again. And this time, I wasn't letting go. The weeks that followed blurred into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years, the kind that makes life feel both exhausting and deeply alive. Every morning, I drove her to the clinic, holding her hand in the waiting room, whispering jokes to distract her from the anxiety that clung like smoke. I watched her face, noting the subtle changes, the lines deepening, the strength in her jaw, the way she still managed to smile through fear. It made me ache in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel for a long time. At night, we cooked together in her small kitchen, music playing softly in the background. She hummed old songs, ones we used to sing together when the house smelled of pancakes and bacon on lazy Saturday mornings. I chopped vegetables and stirred sauces, stealing glances at her, marveling at how much I still loved the curve of her smile, the gentle authority in her movements, the warmth she radiated even when she was tired. One night, after a particularly grueling day of tests, she collapsed onto the couch, exhausted, and I immediately went to her side. "Let me help you," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I don't need help," she muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. "Yes, you do," I replied firmly, lifting her gently into my arms. The way she trusted me so completely, even now, made my heart pound. I carried her to the bedroom, laying her down carefully, tucking her in like I used to when she was sick with a simple cold. But this was more than a cold. This was life, fragile and uncertain, and yet we were together in it, truly together. Over the following days, I noticed subtle shifts in her. She laughed more easily, lingered in my presence, held my hand when she thought I wouldn't notice. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, we stumbled upon a stack of letters from when we were first married. Dusty, yellowed, full of youthful dreams and promises. "I can't believe we wrote all this," she said, her voice soft, almost in awe. "I can," I replied with a small smile. "We meant it then, and I still mean it now." She looked at me, something unspoken passing between us, a recognition that time had taken much from us, but not everything. She leaned her forehead against mine, and in that quiet attic, surrounded by relics of our shared past, I realized we were building something new. Not the same marriage we had lost, but something stronger, forged in adversity and rediscovery. Later that night, we sat together in the living room, her head resting on my shoulder, my arm wrapped around her. "Mike," she whispered, "I was so scared to call you. I didn't know if you'd come, if you'd even want to." "I'd come," I said without hesitation. "Always. You're my life, my home. Nothing changes that." Her hands tightened around mine, and for the first time in a decade, I felt fully seen, fully needed, fully alive in a way I hadn't in years. The past was behind us, but it didn't haunt us. It strengthened us. And in that moment, I knew, without a doubt, that no matter what challenges came next, we were facing them together. Because this wasn't just survival, this was a rebirth. And for the first time, I felt that we might actually have the life we were always meant to share. It was early morning when the call came from her doctor. I was already in the kitchen brewing coffee, the smell filling the small apartment. Her hand found mine across the table, warm and trembling, and I squeezed it without a word. We both knew the drill: tests, results, uncertainty. "Mike," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "It's not good. They want to start treatment immediately." I pulled her into my arms, holding her as if sheer will could protect her. "We'll get through this," I said, even though my chest ached at the thought of what lay ahead. Together, always together. The days turned into a blur of hospital visits, medications, and restless nights. I stayed with her through every procedure, every infusion, every moment when fear threatened to overwhelm her. I learned the rhythm of her pain, the quiet way she tried to mask it, the soft sighs she couldn't hold back. And I learned to be there, not just as a husband but as a shield, a companion, a witness to her courage. One evening, after a particularly draining day, we sat in her living room, the city lights twinkling outside the window. She leaned against me, exhausted but alive, and I brushed her hair back from her face. "You've changed everything for me," she whispered. "I didn't know I could still feel this safe, this loved. I didn't think I deserved it." "You do," I said firmly, cupping her face in my hands. "You deserve everything, and I'll spend every day making sure you know it. I've missed you too much to let the world take this from us again." Her lips curved into a small, tired smile, and I kissed her gently, tasting the faint sweetness of her lips, feeling the trembling of her body in my arms. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a vow that no matter the trials ahead, we'd face them together. The next few weeks were a test of endurance, of love, of patience. Some days, she would retreat into herself, the illness weighing heavily on her spirit. Other days, she would laugh at something silly I did, a spark of the woman I'd fallen in love with shining through. And through it all, we discovered something neither of us had expected. 10 years apart had not diminished our connection. It had forged it into something stronger, resilient, unshakable. One rainy afternoon, as I helped her from the car into the clinic, she paused and looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart skip. "Mike, I don't want to waste another day," she said softly. "I want us. I want you. Fully. No distance. No hesitation." I held her hands, looked into her eyes, and in that moment, all the fear, all the time apart, all the pain we had carried dissolved. "You have me," I said, voice steady, full of certainty. "Completely. And I'm not going anywhere." The rain poured around us, but inside, there was only warmth, only certainty, only the rebirth of a love that had never truly died. And as I guided her into the clinic, I realized this fight wasn't just for her health. It was for us, for the life we had almost lost, and the life we were determined to reclaim. By now, the rhythm of hospital visits, medications, and recovery had become a part of our lives. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about rediscovering each other in the cracks of daily routines. One afternoon, after a long chemotherapy session, she sat in the waiting room, her head resting on my shoulder, and I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself yet. I had fallen in love with her all over again. Her hair, streaked with silver, framed a face that still held the strength and warmth I had married. Her hands, once steady and confident, now trembled slightly as I held them, but that vulnerability made her more real, more human, more precious. "I hate being weak like this," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're not weak," I replied. "You're the strongest person I know, and you're not facing this alone. Not now, not ever." For the first time in years, we shared more than words. We shared glances that said everything, touches that conveyed unspoken apologies for the years we had lost, moments of intimacy that needed no label. When we left the hospital that day, rain-slicked streets reflecting city lights. She grabbed my hand tightly. "Mike, I don't want to think about the past anymore," she said. "I just want now, us, whatever time we have left." I nodded, pulling her closer. "Then we'll live in now, together, every day." Back at her apartment, we spent hours in the kitchen cooking simple meals, talking about everything and nothing. She laughed at my attempts to flambe vegetables, and I laughed at her teasing. It was domesticity I hadn't realized I craved, simple shared moments that reminded me why I had loved her in the first place. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the room in gold, she reached across the table, brushing her fingers against mine. "Mike, I want us to be real again. Not just surviving, not just helping each other through this. I want us, fully." My chest tightened with emotion. "I've never stopped wanting you," I said, voice low but certain. "Even when we were apart, even when I thought I had to move on. You're my home, and I'm not letting you go again." Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, all the fear, all the uncertainty, all the pain seemed to vanish. We didn't need words anymore. Our connection was deeper than anything either of us could articulate. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close, and she rested her head against my chest. The sound of her breathing, the warmth of her body, the softness of her hair against my skin. It was all I had ever wanted, and all I had almost lost. As the days turned into weeks, our bond deepened further. We laughed more freely, argued less, and discovered a rhythm we had thought lost forever. Every small victory, her smile after a hard treatment, her first steps after a weak day, the way she still managed to make me laugh, felt monumental. And I realized that this wasn't just about getting through illness. It was about reclaiming life, together, and making every moment count. That night, as I held her in the quiet of her apartment, I whispered, "I'm not letting go. Not of you. Not ever." She looked up at me, eyes shining with tears and love. "Then we're really together again," she said, "in every way that matters." And in that moment I knew it was true. We weren't just surviving, we were living, and finally, fully, as one. The mornings had taken on a rhythm of their own, slow and deliberate, each second stretched out by the weight of survival and the sweetness of rediscovery. I woke before her, as I had every day since she'd called me, and watched her sleep. The lines on her face were softened in repose, the tiny tremor of her hand as she shifted in the sheets making me ache with a mixture of sorrow and love. I traced a finger along her arm, marveling at how much I still wanted her, still needed her, after 10 long years of absence. She stirred and opened her eyes slowly, squinting against the morning light. "Mike?" she murmured, her voice husky from sleep. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." A faint smile crossed her lips, the kind that used to make my chest tighten the first time I saw it. She reached for my hand, and I gripped it gently, holding it like a lifeline. "You've been so good to me," she said softly, almost as if speaking aloud made her fear vanish. I don't deserve this. You deserve everything," I replied, brushing a strand of her silver-streaked hair behind her ear. "And I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, every step of the way." Breakfast was quiet that day, but comfortable. We had slipped into routines that felt both new and familiar. Her humming softly as she poured coffee, me preparing toast and eggs, our hands brushing in passing, fingers lingering. Small touches, insignificant to anyone else, but for us, they were declarations, affirmations that despite the years, the distance, the hurt, we were finally aligned again. Later, as we prepared to leave for another round of treatments, she paused at the door, her hand on the knob. "Mike," she said, voice catching, "I've been thinking about us, about everything we lost, and everything we still have." I looked at her, heart hammering. "What are you thinking?" She drew a deep breath. "I don't want to just survive this. I want to live again with you. I want us to be more than we ever were. Stronger, closer, real, fully together." The intensity of her gaze pinned me in place. My chest tightened, and I felt tears welling, though I forced them back. "I want that too," I said. "More than anything. You and me, every day we can have." We spent the day at the clinic, hours slipping by in sterile rooms under fluorescent lights. The machines beeped, nurses moved with practiced efficiency, and all around us, life seemed suspended between hope and fear. She sat quietly, her hand in mine, squeezing lightly when fear or pain threatened to overwhelm her. I held her gaze whenever I could, murmuring words of encouragement, stealing little smiles when she allowed it. In the car afterward, the rain started, slicking the streets with gray reflections of city lights. She rested her head against my shoulder, shivering slightly despite her jacket. "I hate this," she admitted quietly. "I hate feeling powerless." "You're not powerless," I said firmly. "You're facing this every single day with courage I can't even describe, and you're not doing it alone." She lifted her head and looked at me, eyes glistening. "I'm scared, Mike. I don't know if I can keep doing this." "You can," I said, voice low, steady, "and I'll be here every second, every single second. We'll face it together, just like we should have all those years ago. I've never stopped loving you, never once." The drive home was quiet, save for the soft rhythm of rain on the windshield. When we entered her apartment, she sank onto the couch, exhausted, and I immediately went to her side. I helped her out of her coat, then settled beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and the tension in her body slowly melted away. "I don't remember the last time I felt "This safe," she admitted, resting her hand on my chest. "Like I have someone truly here with me." "You always had me," I said softly, though it was a confession I'd never said aloud before. "Even when we were apart, even when I thought I had to live my life without you. You've always been my home." Her eyes searched mine, vulnerability and love mixing in a way that made my chest ache. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I didn't realize how much until now. And I was so afraid you wouldn't come, or that too much time had passed." I cupped her face in my hands, holding her gaze. "I'm here. I'm always here. We're not losing anything more. Not each other. Not now." That night, as we sat together in the quiet glow of the living room, she leaned against me, and I felt the full weight of everything we had survived. The fights, the silence, the years apart, the fear of illness, the uncertainty of life. And I realized something profound. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a redemption, a reclamation of the life we were always meant to have. "I want to make up for lost time," she said softly, tracing her fingers along my arm. "I want us to have everything we dreamed of, and more." "We will," I promised, pressing my lips gently to her forehead. "No matter what it takes. No more distance, no more hesitation. We're doing this together, always." For the first time in a decade, I felt fully at peace. Not because the world was perfect, not because her illness had vanished, but because we were finally together, truly together, facing everything side by side. The warmth of her body, the rhythm of her breathing against mine, the certainty in her gaze, it all anchored me in a way nothing else ever could. And as I held her that night, I knew, without a doubt, that the life we had lost, the love we had almost abandoned, had found its way back to us. Stronger, deeper, unbreakable. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were alive, and we were together. The following weeks became a strange combination of ordinary life and extraordinary challenge. Each morning I woke early to make her coffee and breakfast, watching her move through the apartment with quiet determination, marveling at her resilience. Sometimes she smiled at me from across the kitchen, that familiar curve of her lips lighting up the room, and I would feel my heart tighten with longing and gratitude. After all these years, she was still the woman I had loved, and perhaps even more extraordinary than before. Her treatments continued, relentless and draining. Some days, she would collapse onto the couch, utterly spent, and I would sit beside her, holding her hand, murmuring encouragements and sometimes nothing at all. She didn't always need words, just my presence. The steady weight of my arm around her shoulders was enough. There was a rhythm to it now, a strange harmony between her vulnerability and my determination to protect her. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling chemotherapy session, I drove her home in silence. Rain streaked the windshield, washing the city in gray light, and she rested her head against my shoulder, shivering slightly. I slipped my jacket over her, holding her closer. "I hate this," she said softly, voice breaking. "I hate feeling weak." "You're not weak," I said firmly, my hand brushing her hair back from her face. "You're the strongest person I know, and you're not facing this alone. Not now, not ever." She lifted her head and looked at me, eyes glistening. "I'm scared, Mike. Sometimes I just don't know if I can keep going." "You can," I replied, voice low but unwavering, "because I'm right here, every step, every single day. We'll get through this together." By the time we got home, her energy was nearly gone. I helped her out of her coat and shoes, leading her to the couch where she collapsed gratefully. I held her close, brushing the hair from her face, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. She rested her head on my chest, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to simply breathe and be present, letting the intensity of the past months wash over me. Later, as evening settled into the apartment, she looked up at me with a quiet intensity. "Mike, I've been thinking," she said, voice trembling. "I don't want to just survive this. I want to live again, with you. I want us to be everything we were and everything we could still be." I held her gaze, feeling the surge of emotion that had been building for weeks. "I want that too," I said. "More than anything. You and me, fully, every day we can have." We sat there in silence for a long time, the sound of the rain outside punctuating our thoughts. I traced my finger along her arm, memorizing every line, every curve, every tremor that made her so human, so real, so utterly hers. In that quiet, I realized that all the years of separation, the fights, the pride, the distance, had led to this moment, where we could finally reclaim what we had lost. The next morning, we went for a walk in the neighborhood, the air crisp and clean after the rain. She leaned on my arm, walking slowly, and I held her close, careful with every step. Neighbors waved, familiar faces from the past, and for the first time, we allowed ourselves to be seen as a couple again. It felt strange, almost like stepping into a life we had forgotten we had. At one point she stopped and looked up at me, her eyes searching. "Do you remember when we used to sit in that park every Sunday morning?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "I do," I said, smiling back. "You'd make me read poetry aloud, and I'd complain the whole time." She laughed, the sound fragile but full of warmth. "You loved it, even if you wouldn't admit it." "I did," I said softly, brushing my thumb over hers. "I loved everything about you." The walk ended at a small bench in the park, overlooking the quiet lake. She sat beside me, leaning into my shoulder, and I wrapped an arm around her. The silence between us was comforting, filled with memories, with hope, with the slow rebuilding of trust and love. "I was so afraid," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid you wouldn't come, afraid we'd lost too much time." "You'll never lose me again," I said firmly. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." She pressed her hand against my chest, feeling the heartbeat that had kept her safe now for days, weeks, months. "I love you, Mike," she whispered, and I felt every nerve in my body respond. Every bit of longing, every year of absence, every fear dissolved in that simple declaration. "I love you too," I said, pulling her closer. "And I always will." "Ele." As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, I knew that this was no longer about illness or fear. It was about us, about reclaiming our life together, about rebuilding a love that had survived years of absence and had emerged stronger, more enduring than ever. The road ahead would still be challenging, but we had each other, and that was enough. And in that moment, holding her as the wind whispered across the lake, I realized that we weren't just surviving anymore. We were alive, fully, completely, together. The days turned into a rhythm I hadn't expected, but had grown to treasure. Mornings began with coffee and quiet conversation, the scent of fresh bread or eggs lingering in the kitchen. She moved with the careful deliberation of someone still fragile, yet there was a new light in her eyes, a spark that hadn't been there for years. I watched her, heart tight, marveling at how life had given me a second chance, not just at saving her, but at being with her again, fully, without reservations or walls. One Tuesday morning, as we prepared for her appointment, she lingered in the doorway, a small frown on her face. "Mike," she said softly, "I know we've been focusing on treatments and recovery, but I want to talk about us, about what comes after this." I paused, taking her hands in mine, feeling the faint tremor in her fingers. "I've been thinking about that too," I admitted, "and I want the same thing you do. I want a future with you. No compromises, no hesitations." Her eyes shimmered, a mixture of relief and vulnerability. "I've been so afraid to say it," she whispered. "Afraid that time had taken too much, that maybe we couldn't go back." "You don't need to be afraid," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're here, now, and that's what matters." The clinic visit was grueling, a series of tests that left her pale and drained. I stayed by her side, gripping her hand tightly as the nurse explained results and treatment adjustments. I whispered encouragements, reminded her to breathe, and felt a surge of protectiveness that I hadn't known I could feel so intensely. Every anxious glance, every shiver of discomfort, reminded me of how precious she was, how fragile and strong all at once. Afterward, we stopped by a small cafe on the way home, a place we used to frequent before life had pulled us apart. She ordered tea, I got black coffee, and we sat in a corner booth, hands intertwined across the table. The cafe smelled of fresh pastries and brewed coffee, a comforting mixture of warmth and familiarity. She took a sip of her tea and smiled softly. "I can't believe we're here," she said quietly. "Like, really here, together, after all these years." I smiled back, squeezing her hand. "I know, and it feels right, doesn't it?" "Yes," she admitted. "More than anything I've felt in a long time. I don't want to lose this again." "You won't," I said firmly. "I promise. No more distance, no more silence. I'm here for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me be." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table, brushing her fingers against my cheek. "I will," she whispered. "I want us, fully, completely." The weeks that followed were filled with small victories. A good test result, a day with less pain, a laugh shared over a burnt dinner we had attempted together. Every moment felt monumental because it was ours. Ours to reclaim, ours to cherish. I found myself paying attention to every detail. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she laughed at my clumsy attempts to help, the way her hand would find mine in the quiet of the evening. One night, after a long day of appointments, we sat on her couch, the city lights twinkling outside the window. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I held her tightly, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing against my chest. "Mike," she whispered, "I've been thinking about the future, about us, about what we've lost and what we can still have. I want to make up for all the years we wasted." I kissed her forehead gently. "We will," I said. "We'll take every day and make it ours. No regrets, no holding back. I'm not letting anything or anyone take you from me again." Her hands clutched mine, tears running down her cheeks, and I felt the depth of love and relief she had been holding in for years. "I love you," she said, voice trembling but certain. "I love you too," I replied, "and I've never stopped. Not for a second." That night we stayed awake long after the lights were out, talking quietly about hopes, dreams, and the life we were going to build together. It wasn't just about surviving her illness anymore. It was about thriving, about embracing every moment we could have. We laughed at small memories. We planned for a future we had once thought impossible. And we held each other, feeling the certainty that we were finally, truly together. And as sleep finally claimed us, I realized something profound. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a rebirth of our love, stronger, wiser, and more enduring than it had ever been. Every fear, every distance, every heartbreak of the past had led us here, to each other, and for the first time in decades, I felt complete. The mornings began to feel lighter, though her treatment still demanded attention and care. I found myself waking with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, driven not by routine but by the sheer desire to be with her, to watch over her, to share every fleeting moment. She moved slowly through the apartment, and I followed, preparing coffee, breakfast, and a quiet space where she could gather her strength. There was something sacred in these routines, ordinary yet profound, the intimacy of shared life we had almost forgotten. One particular morning, sunlight spilling gold across the living room floor, she turned to me with an intensity I hadn't seen in weeks. "Mike, we need to talk," she said softly, her hand finding mine. "Not about treatments, not about the past, about us." I squeezed her hand gently, leaning closer. "I'm listening." Her eyes shimmered with emotion. "I've been thinking, we've spent so long apart, so much time lost, but now I want us to stop holding back. I want a life together, fully, completely. No hesitation, no fear, just us." I swallowed, feeling the weight of her words settle in my chest. "I want that too," I said, my voice steady but filled with the tremor of emotion. "Every day, every moment, you and me as we should have always been." She smiled, faint but radiant, and it hit me just how much we had survived. 10 years of separation, years of mistakes, fear, and uncertainty. And yet, here we were, fragile but determined, two people reclaiming what life had almost stolen from us. The day passed in a blur of appointments, but unlike before, there was a sense of rhythm, a harmony between her vulnerability and my presence. At the clinic, I watched her through every procedure, whispering encouragement, holding her hand, keeping her grounded when fear threatened to take over. Every small victory, a smile after a needle, a joke whispered between us, a deep breath that calmed her nerves, felt monumental. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were reclaiming life, and doing it together. Afterward, we stopped at a quiet cafe near her apartment. The air smelled of coffee and baked goods, the kind of warmth that reminded me of our old weekends, long before the world had pulled us apart. We sat in a corner booth, hands intertwined across the table, sipping slowly, savoring both the food and the silence between us. "I can't believe we're here," she said quietly. "Together, after all these years." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "And it feels right, doesn't it?" "Yes," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "More than anything I've felt in a long time. I don't want to lose this again." "You won't," I said, voice firm, feeling the surge of emotion pressing behind my chest. "I promise. No more distance, no more silence. I'm here for you, for us, always." She rested her head against my shoulder, and I could feel her trembling slightly. "I love you, Mike," she whispered, and the simplicity and truth of it cut through all the years of fear and absence. "I love you too," I replied, pressing my lips to her hair, inhaling the familiar scent I had missed for so long. And I've never stopped, not for a second. The next few days were filled with small victories that felt monumental. A good test result, a laugh shared over burnt toast, the quiet satisfaction of folding laundry together in the afternoon sun. Simple things that reminded us both of the life we had reclaimed. We began talking openly about the future, making plans we had shelved for decades. Trips we would take, small adventures in the city, even quiet evenings in her apartment reading and cooking together. Every plan, every shared dream, felt like a promise that we wouldn't let fear or time steal us again. One evening, as rain pelted the windows and the apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and brewed coffee, she curled into my chest on the couch. "Mike, I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of the illness, not really, but of losing this, losing us again." "You won't," I said firmly, brushing her hair back from her face. "Nothing is taking you from me. Not now, not ever. We've fought too long, waited too long, to let fear win." Her eyes searched mine, glistening with tears. "I never realized how much I missed this, how much I needed you." "And I needed you," I said, holding her closer. "Every day we were apart, every year we thought we had lost, I carried you with me. And now we have each other again, fully, and I'm not letting go." We stayed awake long into the night, talking quietly, planning, laughing softly at old memories, and holding each other with a newfound intensity. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was living. It was reclaiming the love we had lost and building something stronger, deeper, unbreakable. And as the city lights blinked softly through the rain-streaked windows, I realized, with a certainty that brought tears to my eyes, that this was more than a second chance. This was the life we were meant to have, and nothing, no illness, no fear, no time lost, could take it from us. We were alive, fully, completely, together. By now, the apartment had settled into a rhythm shaped by her treatments and our renewed life together. Mornings were soft with sunlight spilling across the table, the aroma of coffee and toast filling the air. We moved through these moments deliberately, almost reverently, savoring the ordinary intimacy of shared routines, passing the sugar, brushing hands together, exchanging quiet smiles. After years apart, it felt sacred, like rediscovering the heartbeat of a life we had nearly lost. That morning, she paused in the doorway, hand resting lightly on the frame. "Mike, I've been thinking," she said, voice trembling, "about the future, about us. I don't want to waste any more time." I crossed the room and took her hands in mine, feeling the faint tremor of her fingers. "I want the same," I replied. "Fully, completely, no holding back." Her eyes shimmered, a mixture of hope and fear. "I've been so scared," she admitted, "afraid it's too late, that maybe we've lost our chance." I brushed her hair behind her ear. "It's never too late. We're here now, and that's what matters." The day carried on with its usual strain of appointments, tests, and treatments. Some moments left her weak, leaning on me for support, yet beneath that fragility was a quiet strength I had never stopped admiring. I noticed everything. The way her hair caught the morning sun, the subtle firmness in her jaw, the resilience etched in the faint lines of her face. Each moment reminded me how precious she was, and how fiercely I intended to be by her side. That afternoon, a heavy rain began, tapping rhythmically against the windows as I drove her home. She rested against me, shivering despite the warmth of my jacket. "I hate this," she admitted quietly. "I hate feeling powerless." "You're not powerless," I said firmly. "You've faced more in the past weeks than most people face in a lifetime, and you're doing it with courage that leaves me in awe. You're not alone. Not now, not ever." She lifted her head, searching my eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared I won't get through this, and scared I'll lose you again." "You won't," I said, pressing my lips gently to her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere. We'll face it all together, just like we should have all those years ago." Back in the apartment, I helped her out of her coat and shoes, guiding her to the couch. She sank gratefully into the cushions, and I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. For the first time in years, the quiet intimacy of our presence felt enough. Not the end of struggle, but a promise that we were no longer alone in it. That night, we stayed awake, talking quietly about our dreams, our hopes, and what life could look like once the treatments were behind us. We reminisced about old memories, laughed at shared mishaps, and imagined trips we would take, dinners we would cook, mornings we would wake up side by side. Every word, every touch, every glance strengthened the bond between us, creating something unbreakable from years of absence and fear. At one point, she clutched my hand tightly. "Mike, I love you," she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "I never stopped, even when I thought I had to." "I love you too," I said, holding her closer. "Every day we were apart, I carried you with me. And now we have each other again, fully. I'm not letting go." Later, as the city lights glimmered outside the rain-streaked windows, she rested her head on my shoulder, and I could feel the tension of months slowly easing. But beneath the comfort, I sensed a shadow of fear. Tomorrow would bring another appointment, another challenge. I pressed my hand over hers, holding her close, whispering, "We'll take it one day at a time, together, always." And in that quiet, the unease lingered just beneath the surface, a reminder that while we had reclaimed much, the fight was far from over. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, casting thin stripes of light across the kitchen floor. She was already awake, quietly sipping her tea, and I watched her for a moment, marveling at the resilience in her posture, the quiet determination in her eyes. There was still fragility there, yes, traces of fear and exhaustion, but it was tempered by a spark of life that made me realize just how much she had endured. "I think I'm ready," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Ready to push through today, the next appointment, the treatments. I don't want to hide from it anymore." I set down the cup I was holding and came to her side, sliding my hand into hers. "I'm with you, every step. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how long it takes, I'm right here." She smiled faintly, a small flicker of relief passing across her face. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she admitted. "The thought of going through this alone, it terrifies me." "You won't," I said firmly. "Not now, not ever again." The day at the clinic was grueling, longer than usual. Tests, scans, and consultations stretched into hours, leaving her pale and exhausted. I stayed by her side, holding her hand, murmuring encouragements, keeping a calm tone even as my own anxiety simmered beneath the surface. The nurses and doctors came and went, and every time one of them offered a tentative smile, I reminded her softly, "We've got this. Together." When we finally left, the sky was gray, the city streets slick with rain. She rested against me in the passenger seat, and I could feel her trembling slightly. I draped my jacket over her shoulders and held her closer, the warmth of her body grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. "Mike," she whispered, voice catching, "I can't stop thinking about what happens if this doesn't work. What if I don't get through it?" I gripped her hand, turning to meet her gaze. "We'll get through it. You're stronger than you know, and I'll be right here, every step. I'll never let you face this alone." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time there was no despair, only trust and a flicker of hope. "I've been holding my breath for so long," she admitted, "afraid of what the future might bring. But with you, I think I can finally exhale." Back in her apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, utterly drained. I went to the kitchen and made some tea, then returned and sat beside her, letting her lean into me. Her head rested against my shoulder, and for a moment the apartment was filled with nothing but the soft ticking of the clock and the rain pattering against the window. "I want to make it through this, Mike," she murmured. "I want to be there with you, fully. I want us, completely." "You will," I said softly, brushing my thumb over her hand. "And we will. Every day we'll take it together. No regrets, no distance, no fear." We spent the evening quietly, planning small steps forward. Her next appointments, adjustments to her routine, little moments to make life feel normal again. I noticed her laugh more freely than she had in months, even if only briefly, and I held on to that as proof that we were moving forward. But as night fell, and the city outside dimmed under a heavy sky, a shadow of uncertainty crept in. Despite the progress, the treatments, the laughter, there was still the looming weight of the unknown. I held her close, and she pressed her forehead to mine, whispering, "I'm scared, Mike, even now." "I know," I said, tightening my embrace. "And that's okay. Fear doesn't disappear overnight, but whatever comes next, we face it together. I promise." She closed her eyes, resting in my arms, and I realized something vital. Love alone couldn't erase the challenges ahead. The road was far from smooth, and tomorrow could bring setbacks we weren't ready for. But as I felt the steady beat of her heart against mine, I also knew this. Whatever storms approached, we would confront them side by side. And yet, in the quiet of the apartment, with rain tapping insistently against the windows, I felt the first stirrings of doubt creep into my mind. Not about her, not about us, but about what the next test results might reveal. A whisper of fear that, despite everything we'd fought for, the real battle was only beginning. The night closed in around us, and I held her closer, listening to her breath, feeling her pulse. And for the first time in weeks, I realized that tomorrow would demand more than love. It would demand courage, endurance, and the kind of strength we hadn't yet fully tapped. The next morning dawned cold and gray, a thin drizzle streaking the streets outside her apartment. I watched her move through the kitchen with deliberate care, each motion slower than usual, the exhaustion from yesterday's treatments evident in the slump of her shoulders. Still, there was a quiet determination in her eyes that reminded me why I had never stopped loving her, why I had come back into her life when she needed me most. "I'm nervous," she admitted softly as she poured coffee into our mugs. "Every test, every appointment, it's like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't predict." "You don't have to face it alone," I said, taking her hands in mine. "I'm here, every step, every moment, and we'll face whatever comes next together." She gave a small, almost shy smile, and I could see the fragile courage she had been cultivating over the past weeks. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she whispered. "I was so afraid of facing all this by myself." "You won't ever have to," I replied firmly, brushing a strand of her hair behind her ear. "Not now, not ever again." The day was a blur of hospitals, hallways, and the sterile scent of antiseptic. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency. Doctors consulted with calm precision, and all the while I stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragements, stealing small smiles whenever possible. She leaned into me during each procedure, trusting me to bear some of the weight she carried, and I did, gladly, though my own heart ached with the helplessness I couldn't fully hide. Afterward, we drove home in silence, the city streets wet and reflective under the persistent rain. She rested her head against my shoulder, and I instinctively draped my jacket over her. "Mike, I'm scared," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Scared of what might happen, and scared of losing you again." "You won't," I said, gripping her hand tightly. "Nothing is taking you from me. Not now, not ever. We'll face everything, every setback, every challenge, together." When we got back to her apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, utterly drained. I went to the kitchen to make some tea, returning moments later to sit beside her, letting her lean against me. The apartment was quiet except for the soft tapping of rain against the windows, the gentle hum of the heater, and the faint rhythm of our shared breaths. "I don't want to think about tomorrow yet," she whispered, pressing her forehead to my chest. "I just want this moment. Us, here. And we have it," I said softly, holding her close. "But we also have to prepare for tomorrow. We can't ignore what's coming, no matter how scary it feels. We face it together." For a long time we sat in silence, letting the weight of the day settle around us. There was comfort in the ordinary, her hand in mine, the soft warmth of her body against mine, the gentle glow of the city lights through the rain-streaked windows. But beneath the calm, there was an undercurrent of worry. Every appointment, every result could change everything. Love alone would not be enough. We would need courage, endurance, and patience. Later that night, as she slept lightly against me, I stared out the window at the rain-darkened streets, thinking of the uncertainty ahead. I felt the closeness we had fought to reclaim, the trust we had rebuilt, and yet I couldn't shake the shadow of doubt. The tests, the treatments, the unpredictable nature of what lay ahead, it all loomed over us like a quiet storm. And I knew deep down that tomorrow could bring fear, pain, or disappointment. But I also knew that whatever came, we would face it together, not as two people scarred by the past, but as partners determined to reclaim the life we had almost lost. Somewhere in the darkness, beneath the sound of rain and the city's hum, I whispered to myself, "We're not finished yet, and neither of us is giving up." The morning was heavy with silence. She had barely slept, her face pale and lined with exhaustion, but there was a quiet resolve in her eyes that made my chest tighten. Today was going to be another critical appointment, one that could shift the course of everything. I brewed coffee, careful not to spill, and placed a mug beside her before she even stirred. "I'm ready," she said quietly, her voice steadier than I expected. "As ready as I'll ever be," I nodded, taking her hand in mine. "We'll face it together, like we always have. No hiding, no pretending. We do this together." The drive to the hospital was tense, the streets slick from a recent rain. She rested her head against my shoulder, silent, and I let her. I didn't try to fill the quiet with words. Sometimes presence spoke louder than any reassurance. We parked and walked into the hospital, our hands tightly entwined, a quiet symbol of the bond we had rebuilt. Inside, the procedures dragged on longer than expected. Scans, blood work, consultations, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and the soft beeping of machines formed a backdrop to our quiet endurance. She held my hand through every moment, leaning into me when fear threatened to overtake her. I whispered small reassurances, but even I felt the weight pressing down, the gravity of what these results might mean. Finally, the doctor called us in. The office was small, clinical, but it might as well have been the center of the world. She sat beside me, hands clasped together, and I could feel her trembling slightly. The doctor's words came slow at first, careful, measured, and then relief. The treatment was working. She was responding better than expected. There was still a journey ahead, still challenges. But today, for the first time in weeks, hope wasn't just a fragile flicker. Tears sprang to her eyes, and I pulled her close, pressing my forehead to hers. "We did it," I whispered. "We're getting through this." She sobbed softly, the weight of months of fear and exhaustion pouring out, and I held her, letting her release everything she had been carrying alone. "I can't believe it," she murmured. "I was so afraid of losing everything." "You won't lose me," I said, voice firm but gentle. "Not now, not ever. We'll face every step together, and I'll never let go." Back at her apartment, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls, we settled into the quiet comfort of home. She rested against me on the couch, exhausted but smiling faintly, and I could feel the tension in her body ease for the first time in weeks. I think I'm ready to really live again," she said softly, brushing her hand across mine. "To stop being afraid, to stop hiding." "You are," I said, holding her close. "You've been strong this whole time. Now we get to be free together, step by step. No more running from life, no more holding back." She looked up at me, eyes glistening, and I saw something in her gaze that I hadn't realized I had been craving for years. Certainty, trust, and the quiet joy of a love that had survived time, distance, and fear. "Mike," she whispered, "I've never stopped loving you. I don't want to waste another moment. I want us, fully, now. And you have me," I replied, pressing my lips gently to hers, tasting the faint sweetness of relief, hope, and love. "Completely. And I'm never letting go." We spent the evening quietly together, talking, laughing softly, and planning small adventures for the weeks ahead. The weight of uncertainty had lifted just enough to let the light back in, but the memory of the struggle reminded us how precious each moment was. We didn't speak about the past regrets. They were already woven into the fabric of who we were, but we celebrated the present, the life we were reclaiming together. As night deepened, she rested her head against my chest, and I held her close. Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life, oblivious to the battles we had fought and the victories we had claimed. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel fear. Not entirely. There was only the quiet certainty of us, together, facing the future side by side. But even in that certainty, I knew tomorrow would bring challenges, unknowns that might test our resolve. Yet for the first time, I felt ready. Because whatever came, we would meet it as we always had. Together, stronger than we ever imagined possible. The morning sun spilled golden across the apartment, warm and gentle, as if the world itself had decided to celebrate this day. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, her eyes bright with a serenity I hadn't seen in months. I watched her for a moment, marveling at how far we had come, how fragile beginnings and long, painful months had led to this morning of quiet triumph. "You're quiet," she said softly, smiling, her hand reaching for mine. "What are you thinking?" "Everything," I admitted, sliding my fingers through hers. "About how far we've come, about the battles we've fought, about us." She sighed, a mixture of relief and lingering awe. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "Alive, safe, loved. And not just that, I feel like we're finally, really together." "You are," I said, pressing my forehead to hers. "I promise, nothing will ever take this from us again." The day passed slowly, savoring small, ordinary joys, laughter over burnt toast, the soft clink of coffee mugs, and the quiet warmth of simply being side by side. There were no appointments today, no urgent medical tests, no sterile rooms to navigate. Just life, fragile and beautiful, reclaimed. Later, we walked through the small neighborhood park, the air crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. We held hands, our fingers entwined, and I felt a deep, satisfying calm settle over me. Around us, the world moved on as always, but inside this circle of quiet intimacy, time had slowed, giving us space to breathe, to laugh, to love. She paused, looking up at me, eyes glistening. "Mike, I want you to know something. The last 10 years, they were hard, but I think they made us stronger, smarter, more certain of what matters." "I couldn't agree more," I said softly, brushing a strand of her silver-streaked hair from her face. "We've learned what really matters, and we have each other. That's enough to face anything." She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder as we continued our walk. For the first time in a decade, there was no fear pressing down on her, no shadow of past distance threatening to pull us apart, only a steady, enduring sense of trust, of love reclaimed and fortified. We returned to her apartment in the late afternoon, sunlight filtering through the windows, painting the room in soft gold. She moved with ease now, a quiet energy returning to her movements, and I found myself watching her, captivated by the grace and strength she had carried through every challenge. "I want us to celebrate this," she said softly. "Not just surviving, but truly living. Us, finally, fully together." I nodded, smiling. "We deserve that. Every day, every small victory, every laugh and touch. We'll celebrate it all. Together." The evening settled over the city, lights twinkling in distant windows, and we sat on the couch together, the familiar comfort of shared presence surrounding us. She rested her head against my chest, and I held her, feeling the quiet beat of her heart, the warmth of her body, the certainty of the bond we had rebuilt. "Mike," she whispered, lifting her head to meet my gaze, "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, all of you. I always have, and I always will." "I love you too," I said, holding her hands against my chest. "Through everything, every fear, every distance, every challenge, we made it. We're here, together, and we're not letting go." We stayed like that, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the city settle into night. The quiet hum of life outside was no longer a reminder of what we had lost, but of everything we had reclaimed. We had faced fear, illness, separation, and doubt, and we had emerged stronger, closer, and more alive than ever. And for the first time, I understood the fullness of what it meant to truly be together. Not just surviving side by side, but living, breathing, loving, and choosing each other every single day. The battles hadn't vanished completely. The treatments, the uncertainty, the world's unpredictability, but nothing could shake the foundation we had rebuilt. Whatever came next, we would face it, as we had faced everything else, with courage, with resilience, and with an unbreakable bond forged through years of love, loss, and rediscovery. As I held her close that night, the city lights painting our apartment in gold and shadow, I whispered a promise, not just for today or tomorrow, but for every day of our lives. We're here, together, always, and this time, it felt eternal.